Oh, man, I am excited for tonight's show. I've got faux Fred Warner next to me, it looks like. And we have a Fred Warner topic. We're going to talk about that. But the question of the day is, will the 49ers arrogance get the best of them? And what does DeAndre Hopkins being cut from the Arizona Cardinals mean for the San Francisco 49ers? We're going to talk about all of that plus more next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. It's Tuesday, and I got my guy, So Real, Sue Neal, in the building. I really like that jersey, Sunil. What's up, man?
Thank you so much, man. Everything's everything, my guy. And I just want to say there's a thin line between arrogance and healthy confidence.
Oh,
So I know you got a little bit of a clickbaity title, Mr. Twitter Fingers. So I'm here to set the record straight.
all right. Fair enough. We'll talk about it here in a minute. But the first topic at hand is we are at the end of May, almost into June. Nick Bosa still not only is not signed, but really there's no rumblings of a contract and what that contract might look like. What's happening right now is not out of the ordinary for the 49ers. We know that they do tend to wait a little bit on their contracts. But are you surprised that we haven't heard anything about it? I mean, not even like, hey, they've entered negotiations, or, normally by this time in OTAs, you've got Shanahan or John Lynch being questioned about the big contract coming up, and they're like, oh yeah, no, we'll take care of it. I mean, nothing. Literally, absolutely nothing is being talked about with Bosa's contract. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a completely different situation from maybe some of the other contracts where it had made noise. Most recently, the Deebo Samuel's contract, right? Deebo has been somebody who plays the wide receiver position, somebody who not necessarily like it was a question whether or not you want to give him all that money, knowing that he had missed, parts of the season, a significant amount of seasons due to injuries. And he's not necessarily the youngest player at that position type of thing. So, Deebo obviously wanted the contract to look a certain way, and the 49ers weren't necessarily like, it wasn't like a no-brainer for them to give him that contract. So I think it became a little bit noisy. I think that everybody in the world understands that Nick Bosa is going to be a 49er. I think everybody understands that Nick Bosa is going to reset the market when it comes to defensive linemen. So I don't think this is a situation where Bosa needs to use the media to create leverage or anything like that. And I don't think it's a case where the 49ers feel like they have question marks about whether or not they should resign Bosa to a contract that resets the market for him. So I think this is just a case where usually these contracts happen right before training camp's gonna start. We've seen that with Deebo. We've seen that with Kittle. So I think it's just a matter of that they're waiting when training camp's about to start. Sign the contract a few days, maybe a week before training camp starts, and I think that's why there's not much conversation about that. It's a foregone conclusion.
Okay, so what happens if it's a few days into training camp? Let's say they get it done 7 days into training camp. Do you think that Bosa shows up and fully trains, or what do you think happens there?
This is a wild hypothetical, but 7 days into training camp, I don't think Bosa suits up without a contract. No.
Okay.
And I don't think he should, because suiting up can only negatively impact that contract, right? If in that week he gets injured, all of a sudden now that contract comes into question. So there's no reason for him to risk injury without that contract being signed.
Yeah, and I mean, I just throw out 7 as like a hypothetical, but sometimes it does bleed into training camp a few days or what have you. And so I'm just curious to figure out kind of what your thoughts are of what it would look like or what it should look like. I agree. By the way, I also think that Bosa coming in out of shape is 0% chance of happening. So
Right.
I really don't mind. Much different than what happened with Deebo last year, where Deebo, I'm sure he was training, but it wasn't the same, and came in a little bit out of shape after signing the contract. He didn't want to hurt himself and what have you. I fully expect Bosa to come in phenomenal shape, and I would expect that he's a part of mandatory OTAs next month when they have those, and everything will work itself out. Do you think is there an amount that's just too much to pay Bosa? If resetting the market is, 31,000,000, is 35 too much? 38 too much? Like, is there a number that you're just uncomfortable with?
I don't know enough about the cap to really state definitively if there is a number. I'm sure there is a number. I don't know what that number is. However, I don't think that it's going to get to a point where Bosa's feeling like he's not getting enough. Let's just put it that way. I think that they'll come to a number that both parties are happy with, and it's better to get this contract done now versus next year, where I think with all of the cap numbers going up, probably is going to be even a bigger jump.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, there's definitely a number out there that I would be uncomfortable with. I don't think it'll reach that territory, though. I mean, it would
Yeah.
have to be astronomical to feel uncomfortable with that going on. One thing that I caught Ryan's show earlier with Grant, and Grant brought up a really good question, was with Bosa down the stretch, and I actually kind of forgot about this, but down the stretch, he just completely disappeared from a sack number perspective. Any concern there? I mean, there's not a lot of depth on the defensive end. I don't foresee him necessarily getting a lot of relief throughout the year. Do you have a little bit of concern that he was kind of negated down the stretch, or do you just feel like, hey, I mean, you can technically game plan for anybody, but as long as he's getting other people open, you're good? Like, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I think that it also is who they played, right? They went up, Dallas, one of the better offensive lines. Obviously, the Eagles, you and I both agree, is the best offensive line in the league. So I think that has to play in that. And then I also think that, obviously in the playoffs, they are, for Bosa to, in the position that he plays, for Bosa to be able to have success, he has to be able to overcome the whole game plan, which is created towards him not being successful. And I don't think he had enough help on the offensive line to be able to do that. I think with Ridgeway being there now, I think if Jackson makes a leap like we expect him to, or if they don't see that leap, maybe getting a guy like Yannick Ngakoue into the fold is going to help with that. I just don't think there was enough firepower along the defensive line to help Bosa free up. They were able to double team him, sometimes triple team him, and there was nobody that could take advantage of the one-on-one battles, which I don't think is going to be the case this season. So not too much. I mean, obviously you would love to see him be able to be dominant regardless of double teams and triple teams, but that's hard. It's hard to do, especially when nobody else is performing along the defensive line.
Yeah, and he hasn't even hit his athletic prime yet. That's the
Right.
scary part about Bosa, is we're just now getting into that portion of his career. And, early on, Bosa really did struggle with being chipped, and he's figured that out. He's figured out a way around that. He sees it coming. He knows how to beat that. And so I expect him to get better in every facet of his game, each and every offseason and each and every year. This is a question by 49ers Throwback. This is a question that I posed on Twitter and then also posed it here on the community tab and YouTube. But Kyle has 3 seasons left. He has this upcoming season and 2 more. So not in between, no in between takes here. You either extend him now or you let his contract completely ride and then try to extend it at the end. Those are your options. What do you do with Kyle Shanahan?
And I am a Kyle Shanahan homer. I am a paying member of the Shanastans. But I think that there's no doubt in my mind you got to let it ride. Okay. And the reason for that is no matter how – I think Kyle Shanahan will be the coach here for however long he wants to be the coach here, because I do think that he's one of the top 7 easily coaches in the league.
Yeah,
but you have to win. You know what I mean? I think that he's shown he's created a perennial competitive team, a perennial Super Bowl contender. But at a certain point, you gotta get a victory. You gotta win the big one. And I think in this 3 years, we have to see that there's still belief that he can, right? And I think a lot of that comes down to his one glaring weakness, which is figuring out the QB position. So hopefully within the next 3 years, he gets that with either Trey or Brock Purdy. And then I think, he'll earn that extension.
Yeah, most definitely. I would let it ride also. I'm definitely not going to. Some people were like, give him a lifetime contract right now. Shanahan should be a lifer. I'm like, let's win a Super Bowl first before I'm willing to go that far. But you have to find somebody better before you just let him go. So I'm not in the, hey, we got to get rid of him now. But with 3 years left on his contract, I say let it ride. Let it ride. I'm totally fine with that. All right. There was a big, actually huge news in the NFL over the weekend that I think really impacts the 49ers. One, this man leaves the division, DeAndre Hopkins. That's always a good thing when superstar talent leaves the division. Right. Not that Arizona was scary by any means, but the impact now on the 49ers, assuming he doesn't come here, which I think is most likely not going to happen, assuming DeAndre Hopkins does not sign with the 49ers, he is likely going to sign with another top contender. Now, my prediction early on was that would be a contender in the AFC, which is nice because, most likely you're not going to play that team until the Super Bowl unless they happen to be on your regular season schedule. But do you feel like, well, let me just ask you flat out, are you worried about where DeAndre Hopkins goes?
So, I mean, I'm a big D-Hop fan. I think DeAndre Hopkins is one of the best receivers, if not could be in that conversation for best receivers. And the reason why I say that, even though, people may look at his numbers and, he due to injuries and suspensions, he hasn't put up quite the numbers as some of the top guys, but this guy succeeds with whomever's throwing him the ball. And he's always been trouble for the 49ers. He's always been trouble for any team. I feel like no matter who he plays, he's getting 10 catches with 100 yards and a touchdown, right? And anybody who plays fantasy understands how valuable DeAndre Hopkins is. So him leaving the division, I think, is great. I think there's a 0% chance he plays for the 49ers. Like, there's these people that are saying that there's a possibility. There's no possibility. Like, where's he going to play? Like, you're going to move who to the slot? Ayuk? You're moving Deebo to the slot? Nah, this isn't happening, first off. And am I worried about him? I think I could say yes, because I do think he goes to a team that the 49ers are going to play this season. And I also think that he's going to be going to a team that, if not, they already were a Super Bowl contender. He's going to be the piece that makes them a Super Bowl contender. So if I believe that the 49ers are going to the Super Bowl and going to win the Super Bowl like I do, obviously you have to worry about him making somebody on that list better. So I think he's either going to the Bills or the Ravens. The Ravens are on the schedule this year for the 49ers. So if he does go to the Ravens, obviously he'll be lined up against our corners, and him and Odell Beckham, if that ends up being the duo that with Lamar Jackson being the quarterback there, J.K. Dobbins being the running back, like everything that has been the Achilles heels for the 49ers in previous years is on that team, right? Mobile quarterback, fast receiver in Odell, D-Hop, who's always been an issue, and a strong running game. So that's where I would worry about him, but I find it hard to believe he's going to play in the NFC just because from his list, most of those teams are in the AFC.
Yeah, for sure. Third string All-Pro. I mean, it should be pretty easy to find. Go find that clip. Go find that clip where I said that. I'll wait. Definitely have not been saying fire Kyle at all.
And let me defend my boy Jesse, because I'm hard on him all the time. He is not as big of a Kyle Shanahan fan as I am, but Jesse's always been just don't anoint the coach. He has deficiencies. There's room for him to be better. I don't think he's ever said fire Kyle, but he's also said, hey, let's not give him the Gruden contract, because we saw how well that ended up for the Raiders, right? And the great situation they're in right now. So,
yeah, there was one time where I said fire Kyle, and that was when they were 3-5 2 years ago, and I was super frustrated. Like that was like fan emotion coming out. You know what I mean? And I don't even think I said it on YouTube. It was like it was like a tweet. And then like a day later, I was like, all right, I'm over it. You know what I mean? But other than that, I don't think the words fire Kyle have come out of my mouth on a YouTube channel. And if it did, it was a long time ago. It definitely is not like a consistent, like pressing in on fire Kyle Shanahan. That's not the way that's worked. But I think with DeAndre Hopkins, it's interesting because a lot of people view him the way that we view him, which he's still a really, really talented player and a really good receiver at this point in his career. And I saw a lot of people saying he was washed, which is crazy to me. Just last year, he, with Kyler Murray, averaged 9 catches a game and 97 yards in 5 games with Kyler Murray. That's not only elite, that's like top 2-3 receivers in the league elite. Then Kyler left, and over 9 games, he averaged 7 catches for 79 yards per game, which if you take that and break it down over the course of a season, that's like 114 catches, something like that. It's like 114 catches and 1,300 yards. So he's still elite. The talent is still there with DeAndre Hopkins. Now, if you want to question, is he going to be on the field for multiple different reasons, whether it's health or suspensions, whatever, that's a whole different conversation. But is he still a top 10 receiver in this league from a talent standpoint? 1,000,000% he is. I don't think that's debatable until we see the fall off, and we clearly haven't seen it yet. So does DeAndre Hopkins going to a contender, which is very likely to happen, worry me? Hell yeah, it does. And I think that it can definitely balance out the power of potentially the AFC. If he chooses the Ravens, the Chiefs, or the Bills, that team automatically moves up. The Chiefs are already here, but the Bills and Ravens can close that gap big time if they get DeAndre Hopkins. And another thing about the Bills, talked about this around a month ago, Hopkins and Dalvin Cook both could end up with the Bills. That would be terrifying. The Bills with Josh Allen, Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Hopkins, Diggs. That's a scary, scary offense. So we'll see. We'll see where he ends up. I think the Chiefs and the Bills make the most sense. The Ravens definitely make sense. We might get lucky, though, and he might end up on a team like the Patriots, which would be incredible. Please go to the Patriots. I would love that. Maybe he ends up back with his old quarterback, Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. Maybe that's the case. But either way, man, if he ends up on one of these top 3-4 teams in the AFC, he's a really good player. And I think he can definitely balance out the power in the NFL at this stage in his career for 1 year. I'm not saying, he's long-term going to be great for 3, 4, 5 years, But right now, DeAndre Hopkins, from a talent standpoint, is still a top 10 receiver. And when a top 10 receiver goes with an elite quarterback, that's scary. That's definitely scary.
Are you? I know. I don't think there's any smoke. It's just fans on Twitter. But do you think it's even crossing John Lynch's mind to make a play for him?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that they have looked into it for sure, but I don't think it's that serious. And I can understand why. I mean, he's probably going to cost you a bit. I mean, how many weapons can you really have? You've got all pro tight end, all pro running back, all pro wide receiver, up and coming wide receiver in Brandon Ayuk. You can only have so much. I mean, at some point, it's like I don't know. I don't know when it's too much, but maybe adding DeAndre Hopkins is a little too much. I don't know how you figure that out on the offense. So not sure. People are talking about the steroids with Hopkins. I mean, I don't know. My whole thing is my stance is probably different than most people, but I feel like there's two different types of steroid usage. There's those that are using steroids when they're perfectly healthy to cheat the system. Steroids are performance enhancing drugs. And then there are those who have catastrophic injuries that use them to recover from those injuries. And I personally put those in two different categories. That's just me personally. I feel like if somebody has a significant injury, they shouldn't be in a testing pool and they should be able to use whatever it takes to get back. Once they are back, they should piss clean, essentially. That's the way that I view it. I have zero problem with people or players using performance enhancers when they are in a recovery mode from a major injury, something like an Achilles tear, an ACL, those types of things, or something worse, a major bone break. I personally put those in two different categories. Do you think I'm off my rocker for that one?
I mean, clearly being a Conor McGregor stan, you're gonna say that type of case for steroid users. But I agree with you too. I don't think D-Hop is a dirty player. Yeah. He's been amazing and above reproach, not just on the field but off the field. His whole career, he's handled ridiculous situations like what was going on in Houston, being traded disrespectfully, I would say, and always handled it with class. So I don't put him in a I don't consider him a cheater or a dirty player. I just think that, you know, he's trying to get back on the field and help his team as much as possible. And, you know, it's cheating because it broke the rules, but I don't necessarily look at him as a tarnished player. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people, you know, maybe people are joking about it because I know that I did love that back and forth with Travarius Ward and him, calling him steroid boy or what have you. I definitely enjoyed that, but I don't know. I think there's a distinct difference. Definitely a difference there. Okay, some other interesting news came out. Jimmy Garoppolo and his injury. Now, the reason I want to talk about it, two different reasons. One, the way I understand it is the 49ers are kind of banking on Jimmy playing for the Raiders because that's a compensatory pick if he does. If that contract gets wiped and he doesn't play for the Raiders, I don't believe that they're going to get a compensatory pick for him next year. So that's an impact one way right there with this injury. And I think the second potential impact is the 49ers have kind of shown now, they have a track record that they don't have a good grasp of when players are going to be back or when they are going to be healthy. I still think D Ford is working out outside of John Lynch's window, and he should be back anytime now. The way they talked about him week to week for 2 years, D Ford. Jimmy Garoppolo is one. We've had other injuries throughout the course of the 49ers in this regime where they really just have not had a good timeline on these injuries. And now they've got this timeline with Brock Purdy and when he should be back. And the way they're talking about it is they are expecting or hoping, however you want to put this, that he is back prior to the actual timeline that most people are back. So what are your thoughts overall on this Jimmy Garoppolo news, and does it have any impact on how you view the way that they talk about Brock Purdy and his return?
Yeah, I mean, from a personal level, it's tough. I feel bad for Jimmy. Obviously, this is if his contract gets wiped out, he's back to the drawing board and trying to find a team that he needs to go back to a backup role and earn a starting position, all that kind of stuff. So I feel for Jimmy. I understand how tough it was for him with the fan base and all the criticism, whether it's warranted or not. Just as a human, you feel for him on that level. As far as what it means for Brock Purdy and the 49ers, I think it's a little bit different of a situation because I think Jimmy was extremely independent in how he handled his injuries. I don't think he consulted the team or necessarily went with what the team recommended, right? Which was some of the fallout as far as the offseason last year, right? He mentioned he was going to do a certain thing and ended up flipping it up without the team really knowing about it, kind of thing, and went against what the team recommendations were. That doesn't seem the case with Brock Purdy. I think Brock Purdy and once again, these are all feelings, not facts, but just from seeing how it's playing out, seems like Brock Purdy and the 49ers are very much so integrated in Brock Purdy's recovery. It seems like it doesn't seem like they're off the same. It does seem like they're on the same page. So whatever the 49ers are stating as far as the timeline, I think it's more educated than maybe what it had been for Jimmy, because I don't think Jimmy necessarily was as forthcoming with the 49ers as I think Brock Purdy is. So with that being said, I do think that the fans are a lot more, or especially Brock Purdy fans and Trey Lance haters are a lot more excited about the Brock Purdy timeline. I don't think that he's going to be ready to start week one. And I think that, he's been tempering expectations. And I think that even the way Kyle Shanahan words things, which he's very specific on what he says, he always has that plausible deniability. I think he's stating that, he's not going to be ready for week one because he's not going to be able to throw early enough to warrant that. So I don't know. I don't expect Brock Purdy to not be ready to play at some point this season. So I don't know if that answers your question though.
Yeah, I think every injury and every situation is very different. And I believe that the 49ers, for the most part, I think early on, that first press conference when the season was over, they definitely misspoke on when he would be back. They were talking with all sorts of confidence that he was for sure going to be back. Then there was a delay in the surgery because of swelling. And I think from that point on, the 49ers, the way that they've talked about the injury and the timeline has been pretty spot on and cautiously optimistic, I think is a fair way to say it. And I think Brock Purdy's kind of been the same. So I'm not necessarily worried about Brock. I will say I am worried about about Jimmy not playing though in that compensatory pick. I would love to get something for Jimmy Garoppolo going to the Raiders. Plus, I want him to be able to resume his career. No ill will towards Jimmy. I just don't think he's a very good starting level quarterback. I don't want him on the 49ers. But I hope that he's able to resume his career and he's able to play. And I'm also curious on how it plays out. One of the things that I know I was looking forward to was him being back on time for that training camp battle with the 49ers when they do the joint practice. So I hope he's back by then. You get to hear about that and how that's going. And then I hope that he's available for the season and we get to see how it plays out over with the Las Vegas Raiders. I think it'd be a lot of fun and a lot of fun to follow and talk about and kind of integrate into things that we got going on. So I don't know. I wish the best for him, but I'm not necessarily worried about the timeline on Brock, I just feel like we're basically anywhere from middle of August to middle of September. And anything in between there is realistic. And, depending on the day or who you talk to and the optimism, that could change. But right now, I feel pretty confident that that's where we're going to fall. And unless something crazy happens, that's pretty much what we're looking at. And that's the way the 49ers are talking about it. So I'm with you. Shay says, y'all want to bet Flav lives in a basement? I don't know. Maybe he lives in the Midwest and they need basements because of tornadoes and stuff. So maybe he might live in a basement. I'm not really sure where Flav lives. Randall says, hey, Jesse, let's change everyone's trade narrative and say, let's trade the greatest thrower of the football in Sam Darnold. Since everyone thinks Sam is so great, then Vegas should be calling. Wouldn't that be interesting if Trey got traded to Vegas, though? Just for storyline's sake, Trey and Jimmy Garoppolo in Vegas together, I just feel like that would be an interesting trade to see. Wow, we got a Lions fan in here, Mr. Roscoe. Big Lions fan at 13-4, he says. I don't know about that. Max Crosby for Lance, that's an interesting one. I wouldn't be mad at Crosby coming here for sure. Yeah. All right,
if you're going to finesse any team, wouldn't the Raiders be the team that would overpay for? So like I could see them trying to get, and it's funny. That's kind of interesting. The Sam Darnold take, right? Maybe that is a quarterback that the Raiders might be looking at or trade for. I think Carson Wentz is out there still. I've heard him, but it'd be interesting. I mean, the 49ers have 3 quarterbacks, so you would think maybe one of them that the Raiders might actually make a call about. So we'll see.
Dude, I have to talk about it because it's here in Tampa, and I think it's hilarious. Did you see the videos of Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask competing for the job?
I did.
Oh, dude. Do yourself a favor and go watch that one. The throws, especially Baker, that he was missing are so laughable. Oh, my God. He missed... Nobody guarding him, by the way, but just a tight end up the seam, maybe 15 yards in front of him. He overthrows him by like 10 yards. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. So
they're definitely in the Caleb sweepstakes for next season.
Yeah, it's interesting. Niner Grandpa says, yo, have you seen my content about Grant Cohn? No. I think this is the first time I've ever seen you in my chat, but I appreciate you for showing up. Do you have a YouTube channel? And if you do, definitely let us know what it is. I would love to see this content about Grant Cohn. Curious to see what it is. All right. Title of the show is, will the 49ers arrogance get the best of them? And the reason I bring this up is because there was a recent comment by Fred Warner where he talked about how he believes defenses still win championships, and it's up to the 49ers defense to set that tone and go out and win a championship on the back of their defense. And when I couple this with the way that Deebo and some of the other 49ers have talked about the Philadelphia Eagles, who were in the Super Bowl, and how they believe that they would have won that game basically for sure if Brock Purdy had played, and then continued to talk about that game months later, it just got me thinking, are the 49ers cocky? Are they arrogant? Are they just confident enough? Like, how do you look at the 49ers situation? And if we have an arrogance meter, are they too arrogant, basically?
So not always, but I think it's interesting to ask this question the opposite way, right? Like, could a team be too quiet as well, right? Because if you could be too loud, which I think this is kind of what you're saying, can a team be too quiet where you feel like they're not confident enough and that's the reason why they're losing? And I think the answer to both is no. And what I mean by that is I look at let's take the statement. So you said Fred Warner is stating that the defense is going to win championships, and the defense is going to, the defense is going to need to lead this team to a championship. Fred Warner,
he basically said they are going to win a Super Bowl, and it's going to be because of the defense. And the 49ers, essentially, the 49ers will put defenses on the map when they win the Super Bowl. Is basically what he said in a roundabout way. Yes.
Okay. Well, he is the captain of the team on the defensive side of the ball. Absolutely, he's going to believe that what he's contributing to this team is going to be a majority of the reason why this team, succeeds. And he's stating it from facts because this team has been saved a multitude of times based off of how well this defense has played. I think that Deebo, the way he's coming out against the Eagles is one. I think Deebo is a very confident player. And I also think that he's responding to a lot of talk from the Eagles players and fan base as far as kind of quote unquote trash talking the 49ers after a loss. Like, I think he believes that if they had a quarterback, that the game would have gone different. And is it bad to have that belief? I don't think so. But the 49ers have put themselves in a situation where the media will run with this narrative that if they don't end up accomplishing the ultimate goal of winning the Super Bowl, which, mind you, 97% of the league doesn't, right? They're going to point back to this team was too arrogant to win a championship. This team was too into themselves. This team was overconfident, yada, 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 yada. Like, but to me, I don't think what is said up until that point matters. I think how they play. Now, if Deebo is talking all this trash and then his play on the field is trash as well, obviously you're going to point to that. But I don't think that's going to be the case. Right now we're watching in the NBA a guy like Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is trash talking on the court day in, day out. He's trash talking when
buckets. You get it right.
Absolutely. Jimmy Butler, he is trash talking when he's down by 10 points to an amazing defender in Drew Holiday and winning games. He is trash talking Grant Williams. He is confident when when their team just gave up a 3-0 lead and saying we're guaranteed this victory, all this kind of stuff, and he's backing it up. Now, if he lost any of those games, obviously the narrative would be he's too cocky, he's too arrogant, and all that kind of stuff. But because they win, he has the heart of a champion. He has, it's all about what the result is. So I don't think the arrogance is going to be the reason why they win or lose. I do think it will be a narrative, though, if they do lose. And if they win, it's going to be these guys were confident. These guys were called their shot, Babe Ruth, all that kind of stuff. So I just think it's more narratives than reality.
I got it. Okay, that's totally fair. I think this one's tough for me because I don't think they're being too arrogant or cocky, the players, when it comes to the Eagles or what Fred Warner said necessarily. In fact, that's a big reason why I'm picking them to beat the Eagles this year is because I feel like they've got to back up everything they said, and I feel like they will back up everything they said. I feel like Deebo is that guy, and as long as he's healthy, he'll have a huge game. I do think the 49ers have been a little arrogant or cocky when it comes to certain things, though. Maybe that's Shanahan a little bit as far as the quarterback position and thinking that, they can win with almost anybody, or if we get 3 kind of mediocre guys, that's good enough as long as I have somebody healthy type of thing. So I think that the arrogance or cockiness doesn't necessarily pertain to Fred Warner or Deebo or what the players are saying, but I do think there's some arrogance or cockiness in the 49ers organization with the way that they've continued to run it back, with the way that they haven't gotten that high tier quarterback when they've been available or readily available. And maybe it won't matter. Maybe they'll win a Super Bowl this year and literally none of that will matter. But I do think there are areas within the organization that arrogance or cockiness has shown up, certainly.
Yeah, but it's only because you're defining them as arrogance, right? If nobody knows, so there was quarterbacks available, quarterbacks that said 49ers was on their list. That doesn't mean that that it made sense, right? You like you said, is there a number that you wouldn't re-sign Nick Bosa at? What if those numbers were numbers that didn't make sense for the 49ers? Or what if there were certain things that were said that, or certain, there could be a multitude of reasons why those quarterbacks weren't brought on. We're just assuming it's because Kyle Shanahan said we didn't need those quarterbacks when we know that he aggressively tried to get Matt Stafford. It didn't work out because they swooped him before a deal could be made. We know they tried to go get Aaron Rodgers and it didn't work out for whatever reason. Like, I just think that it's easy to put that narrative, like I said, when it doesn't work out. It's easy to say they're just arrogant. They think they could win with what they have. When in actuality, they're just making the best with what they have. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what they want. I think I look at Kyle Shanahan and he's evolved from when he first came in as a 49ers coach. And I think he's aggressively tried to fix the quarterback situation. I just don't think it's one of his fortes necessarily, right? So, but I don't think it's from lack of effort or because he believes that he's better than all these other coaches and doesn't need a great quarterback. I just don't think he necessarily might be great at understanding what a great quarterback is. I just think he could bring the best out of the players that are on his roster.
Yeah, I buy that a little bit. The problem is that when you have multiple players come out and be like, well, I mean, it really doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Like, we're going to be just fine no matter what. That is something that the franchise does carry. They definitely buy into that. Like, we're good as long as we have everybody else. The quarterback is like, just give us a healthy right arm or left arm. We're good to go. That is a top-down leadership thing. Clearly, they're getting that from somewhere, and they do say it on a regular basis. So I do.
But when do those comments come out, though, Jesse?
Deebo said it right after the Eagles game. He said it.
But I'm saying it's always in response to an injured quarterback, right? And so what I'm saying is, I look at that, like, I don't think they've ever come out and been like, it doesn't matter who's our starting quarterback. We're the best team in the league. I think it comes to a point where it's like an injury has happened. Are we going to give up on the season, or do we have enough confidence in ourselves that if we have a healthy quarterback, it doesn't matter who that quarterback is, we're still going to be able to go out there and compete and win every single game? That's where I think it's coming from. Not, hey, if we had a choice, we don't need Patrick Mahomes. We could win. If it's a choice between we could have Patrick Mahomes or we could have Brock Purdy, I don't think the team's coming out as like, we don't need Patrick Mahomes. We could win with Brock Purdy, where it seems like that's kind of what you're saying. They're saying, I don't think that's what they're saying. I think it's just, they don't give up on the season just because a quarterback's injured, and they've proven it. It doesn't really matter who started the season as a quarterback. They're still going to be competitive as long as there's a competent quarterback playing. So I think that's where it more comes from.
Okay, fair enough. Brother Bob says, Nails, wasn't it dumb for us to keep Jimmy G on the active roster instead of placing him on IR and signing another quarterback for the playoffs? I don't know. I feel like hindsight's kind of 2020 with this one, because if the timeline for Jimmy was, say, 6 to 9 weeks, then there was not going to be a better quarterback that you could have had back up Brock Purdy that was readily available other than Jimmy G. And so it's a gamble. It's a calculated risk for sure. And I think if Brock Purdy had gone down and Jimmy somehow was healthy to play in the NFC Championship, it would have been looked at as an amazing calculated risk. But because he wasn't, and then Josh Johnson got injured, it turns into like this whole thing like, well, but they could have, should have, would have. I mean, ultimately, I don't know if it would have mattered who would have played quarterback. Most likely they were getting multiple guys injured that game. So I don't know. I feel like based off the timeline that they were probably given, it was a calculated risk that was worth taking in the moment. But hindsight's 2020. Yes, it would have been nice if they had placed him on IR and had the other roster spot for maybe another quarterback that wasn't Josh Johnson, for sure. Somebody, what's up, glass half full guy? Appreciate you. Oh, it was Shay. There it is. I don't even know what this means. Who puts raisins in mac and cheese? Maybe that's the point. I guess. Nee says defense relies too much on the way that refs call the game now to be surefire way to win. Hell, this last Super Bowl, the grass alone messed with both defensive lines. Yeah, I will say it does seem that there's always something that comes up in a Super Bowl lately with the Chiefs, especially where the defense is kind of negated a little bit. You know, with the 49ers, it was the offensive line that had the most holding calls in the NFL for the Chiefs going up against the best defensive line in football. It couldn't get a single holding call in the whole Super Bowl. That's interesting. And then when they play the Eagles, the turf isn't good, and so really none of the pass rushers could get home. There was a lot of good pass rushers on both sides of the ball. So I don't know. I mean, it's worked out in their favor. I'm not saying they weren't the best team, but to win a championship with defense in today's era is much harder than what it used to be, for sure. Brother Bob says, thanks for answering the questions, but our timeline related to injuries is always off, as you said. I think that was arrogance too, just like our view of the quarterbacks. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I definitely think there's some arrogance within the organization. For sure.
But that would be 6 quarterbacks. That would be the 6th, right? Because they went through fifth. So they would have to find a 5th quarterback that is somewhere out there that still can play ball at a certain level. And literally they didn't have 4, right? Because Josh Johnson couldn't even hold on to a football. So I think when you're looking at a 5th quarterback being better than Jimmy, who in all intents and purposes was supposed to be ready, available, right? And possibly could have been available, but decided that he wasn't ready for whatever reason. I don't know. I think that's a little harsh criticism.
Glass half full guy says, do you feel this team is better than the Eagles, or do you think the Eagles are still better? I think it's close. Man, both of these rosters are stacked. I would lean towards the Eagles only because they've constructed their team the way that I would construct a team. The 49ers are supremely talented. I mean, outside of the quarterback position, probably the most talented team in football. But their roster construction is not necessarily how I would choose to do it. So based off of that, I would lean slightly towards the Eagles, but it's really, really close. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I think right now it's clearly the Eagles just because we know what to expect from their quarterback play, whereas we don't know what to expect from our quarterback play quite yet. And I think that they upgraded their running back situation. I think Swift is better than Sanders. Obviously, it's another year with Brown there. I think they have, they're loaded at every single position, at every single layer. So I think that the Eagles are better. I think the 49ers can make up that gap, but they still have to show that they can.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's some question marks for the 49ers that if those questions become resounding answers in a positive manner, then yes, they certainly can close that gap. It's not far off. It's not far off, but we both agree that right now it's the Eagles for, I think, kind of obvious reasons. Brother Bob says a 5th quarterback who can actually throw since we had 0. Yeah. I mean, but then there's the flip side of game day. You can only dress so many quarterbacks. That was the rule change, right? That So I don't know, man. It was a crappy situation. I don't want to
Could
blame
you
anybody for
could,
why the 49ers were necessarily in that situation.
could they have even had three quarterbacks
That's what I'm saying. I don't
dressed?
think you can. I don't think you could have had 3 quarterbacks active.
Yeah, so
So I don't know. I'd rather have Eason than CMC Juice or Broken Brock. Yeah, that would have been nice. I agree with that. That would have been nice on that as well. All right, let's move on. Uh, there are players that I believe are going to leave the 49ers after this season. And I think they are contributing players. Is there anybody off the top of your mind that you can think of that's a contributor on the 49ers that you think will be gone after this year, that we're looking at this is their final year in a 49er uniform potentially?
I think that if the 49ers win a Super Bowl, there will be more.
Okay,
But
let's talk
reg-
about that.
but regardless of if the 49ers win a Super Bowl or not, I think Kyle Juszczyk, this could be his last season possibly. I think he's just getting up there, and the position he plays, and he wants to probably keep his brain being a Stanford grad or a Stanford guy and all that kind of stuff. So he possibly could be gone. Trent Williams, possibly. He's already kind of talked about retirement, and I think that kind of bubbles over in your head once you've already started saying it out loud, type of thing. Um, yeah, but those are the two off the top of my head that I think are contributors that possibly could be gone. I think that if they win a Super Bowl this year, those two probably are gone.
Okay, that's totally fair. That's totally fair. I think if they win a Super Bowl, I agree. I think Trent's gone. I think there are 3 players that, regardless, are going to be gone for sure. One is going to be Gibson. I think this is his last year for sure with the 49ers, but probably in the league. I think he's probably going to retire. So I
Yeah,
think Gibson is one. I think Juszczyk is going to be gone as well. I think this is his last year in contract. And I don't see the 49ers extending him, even if he decides to continue playing. And I think the 49ers have already set the precedence in kind of streaming a third wide receiver the way they did with Kendrick Bourne, letting him walk. I think they're doing the same exact thing with Jennings. And I think they're preparing moving on with him by the way that they've drafted a receiver the last couple of years. So I think Jennings, Gibson, Juice for sure. They win a Super Bowl, Trent Williams. And I'm not saying these guys are for sure gone that are contributors, but a couple of guys that might be cap casualties after this season, potentially, to try to save money and maybe get younger, would be Eric Armstead and George Kittle. So keep an eye out for them, because if you do get rid of them, you can save some pretty significant money. And they are both entering huge, huge contract years next year. So not saying for sure they're gone, but just a couple of guys to keep notice on that are under contract, that are big time contributors, not just contributors, big time contributors that they may decide to move on from depending on what's coming back and who the potential replacements are.
yeah. I would say more Armstead than Kittle.
For
I
sure.
don't
I
think
agree.
that they've replaced Kittle quite well enough to be able to let him walk. Whereas I think they do have maybe some options there that could possibly make that Armstead blow a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. What have, yeah, Juice, Jennings, Gibson. Okay, so we're on the same page there for sure. Ray. I don't know. What's Ray Ray's contract situation? Let me see. Is he a free agent next year? So Feliciano. Oh, Ray Ray is a free agent. Yeah, you're probably right. He's probably gone. That's a good call.
I don't know if Ray Ray is considered a contributor quite yet, though. I don't
Yeah,
know.
but he's still our special team guy, right? Like he's the punt and kick returner.
If that even
So
means anything anymore.
punting, yes, it does. But yeah, kick returner is like what what are we even doing here? Golly, I'm glad that we spent that third round pick on a kicker. You know what I mean? Kittle, no way. The only reason I say Kittle is because as it stands now, the 49ers are roughly $10 million over the salary cap next year. Now, obviously, there's a lot of maneuvering that can happen, but that's as it stands now. And if you get rid of Kittle, you're going to save basically that amount. So I don't think it's likely, but I do think it's a possibility. If I'm looking at players that have big contracts that are major contributors that they could potentially move on from, I don't think it's Deebo yet. I don't think it's Travarius Ward. I don't think it's Trent Williams. I mean, he may decide to retire on his own. I don't think it's Warner, certainly. It would have to be Kittle and Armstead is my two. I would put Armstead here and then Kittle, definitely below that. But I think there's a small possibility. I just don't think it's impossible that he is cut. You know what I mean? To save money.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see how this year goes. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it. If let's say one of these tight ends ends up being really, really good and Kittle gets injured again and then may miss all of next offseason and there's we don't know exactly how he's going to return. I don't know. There's a lot of things that go into it and hopefully none of those things happen, but I think watching how this season plays out will also kind of help us better determine if he's actually a potential cut candidate because of that contract as well.
One we're not mentioning that I think is also a for sure is either Trey Lance or Brock Purdy.
Oh, that's a good call.
Next season, I don't think both of them come back next season. By this season, there'll be one of them that's decidedly the starter, and I think the other one gets traded away.
I disagree. I think if Brock Purdy is the for sure starter, then Trey is gone. I think if Trey's the for sure starter, that Brock Purdy stays. Because he'll have a whole nother 2 years under contract at as cheap as he can possibly be. And can you find a better backup in the league than Brock Purdy? I mean, especially for this roster, I don't know. So I think what you're saying is true on half of it. But I think if Trey Lance is the presumed starter going into week 1 next year, that Brock Purdy stays on this roster.
I think that the 49ers will get an offer that they can't refuse for either of them, right? Because the way it's panning out, Trey Lance is going to be able to showcase himself this season, whether through the preseason and the beginning of next season. Regardless, like we all pretty much agree that Brock Purdy is not going to be ready for week 1. So Trey Lance is going to get some games under his belt. He either wins that starting role or he doesn't, right? If he wins that starting role, based off of the 8 games we saw from Brock Purdy last season, winning 2 playoff games, there is a team in the league that will trade for Brock Purdy, knowing that he is on the same type of contract. And I think the 49ers would want those draft picks versus keeping him on the bench if Trey Lance is that starter.
So Bobby D says, and he basically poses what you said, but he does it in question form. He says, Jesse, what about Trey? Laser gun to your head.
Or super soaker.
Super soaker to your head. Is he on the team in 2024? Yes. What do you think, Sidney?
I mean, I've already stated I think he's the quarterback that plays in the Super Bowl for the 49ers this year. So obviously I think he's on the team in 2024.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Bobby says, no way, Jesse. If Trey loses a fluke game, the locker room will go nuts to bring in Brock. He had too much success. I think that's true for this year. If they go to the NFC Championship with Trey and Trey plays really well this year, then I don't think that's the case. So I think those scenarios, if Trey's on the team next year, it's because he played well this year and was a contributor, and they think he is the starting quarterback week 1 of next year. And if that is the case, then I don't think a fluke game in week 3 of next year or week 2 is going to cause them to go to Brock Purdy. So,
can I ask you a question, Jesse, about the Trey Lance Brock Purdy thing?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say Trey Lance, in his time starting for the 49ers, the offense looks just like it looked when Brock Purdy was quarterback. And what I mean by that is they're putting up the 30-plus points per game. The running game's looking good. The passing game's looking good. It looks very similar and same results as Brock Purdy was getting being the starter. Who would the 49ers stick with? Or what does Trey have to do to win outright? Like, what does he have to show to be able to like outright win that starting position? Because, and the reason why I'm prefacing it this way is, if the offenses look the same, you just mentioned Brock Purdy is that much cheaper, right? So what would Trey have to show to be able to the 49ers look at it and be like, this is our guy, not Brock Purdy?
I mean, I think he's not going to play exactly how Brock Purdy did. So even if the numbers and stuff are the same, how he's going about it are going to be completely different. And I think Trey Lance was here for a reason. He was drafted for a reason. They were trying to get away from that Jimmy Garoppolo mold. You know, people can say it was injury and what have you. Frankly, they didn't think Jimmy Garoppolo was good enough. They didn't like his skill set. They had other skill sets to choose from when it came to the draft. They decided against the skill set that maybe a Brock Purdy brings to the table with Mac Jones available. Slightly different, right? I mean, Brock Purdy is certainly more fleet of foot. Mac Jones has a little bit of a stronger arm, but how they get it done in the passing game is somewhat similar. They opted not to go that route to bring in somebody like Trey Lance. So if Trey Lance is showing that promise, even if he's more expensive, I think that is the preference. They would prefer to win with his type of skill set because they probably feel that skill set has a ceiling that can't be reached as easily. And so I think based off of what they spent to get Trey Lance, showing what they would prefer or what Shanahan would prefer at the position, I think as long as they're winning, that's it. Even if the price is cheaper, if they're winning and he's playing well and continues to show improvement, there's just no reason to ever go back.
Fair.
So, no, I didn't report you. If I reported you, I wouldn't be able to see your comment. So, and you wouldn't be able to comment actually on the channel. So, no, definitely didn't report you. Not at all. Anyways, that is the end of the show. I'll be on tomorrow with Grant, 49ers After Dark. I'm working on a show with Greg Pinelli, trying to figure out the logistics of what that looks like. I might also do a show tomorrow with Vish, trying to figure that out as well. So either way, stay tuned here at Last Second Sports. Make sure to like and subscribe. Same thing with Sunil's channel. Link is in the description. So Real Sports Talk. Sunil, as always, thank you for joining me on Tuesday, and I'll see you next week. Peace.